You're listening to the Jan Price Show all about movies, and today my guest is Emmy-award-winning editor Nena Erb. Welcome back to the show, Nena.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been last time you were on the show was May of 2019, and many things have happened to you since May of 2019. So I'm excited to catch up on what's been going on in your career. Since that time, you won an Emmy in 2020, and you gave quite a wonderful acceptance speech. Do you remember what you said?
I barely do.
I have a quote here if you can't remember.
I just remember being very nervous. That's all I remember.
Well, you said, and I think this was really wonderful. You said none of us is going to remember who won this award a week from now. But being an immigrant and a woman of color, I'll always remember that Issa Rae made sure that I had a seat at the table. We always need to follow that lead and make sure there are seats at the table for our fellows. Many thanks for for your Emmy anyhow. So that was really kind of a amazing speech to give. Have things changed in the last 3 years in regards to that? There were
Um,
more seats at the table for more women and women of color in particular.
yes, yes. Fortunately, I am seeing a shift in the landscape of television and movies. There's been more representation, for women of color, Asians, Latinx. I think, obviously Asians are still underrepresented, but I do see the change, and people are trying to bring more programming that have Asian representation onto the media. Yeah, it has changed. I mean, things are going to take a while, but I'm very I'm happy and I'm hopeful, and I'm glad that things are going in the right direction.
Yes. For sure, for sure. Um, Now you're nominated for another Emmy for Insecure, and that's what you won for before, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And then you won, this is, you were also, your first Emmy was in 2016,
Mhm.
and that was for Project Greenlight. So you're on a roll, girl. And you've won Ace Awards since then, and wow,
Oh, actually, I yeah, I've just been nominated for Ace, so I like to joke that I'm an Ace Eddie loser.
well, at least you're nominated. You're in good company for sure. So what's it like when you get that call that you've been nominated for an Emmy?
Um, you know, uh, I mean, 2016, I didn't even know that the episode I worked on was submitted, so it was really a shock. And in 2020, I never go through life thinking I'm going to get nominated, because then you're just disappointed all the time, right?
Right,
So,
right.
so it's like, whatever. I'm just living my life, and I remember thinking like, okay, I'm going to set my alarm because I want to get up, hear Issa's nomination, congratulate her. Of course, I completely forget, and we're in the middle of pandemic, so I slept through the whole thing. And my assistant calls me and tells me like, "Oh, hey, I'm feeling much better." I was like, "Yeah, I know things have been really tough with the pandemic." She's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Well, Issa got nominated, right?" And she's like, "Yeah," and she in the show too. And I was like, "Oh, great." And she was like, "And us too." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" And so that was such a huge shock. And of course, fast forward to this year, Insecure, the final season dropped like a year ago. So I'm thinking like people forgot about us. They've all moved on to new shows, and I figure, all right, season 5 will just quietly fade away. And so this was definitely not expected. I was just getting ready for work, normal Tuesday. My friend Lauren texts me, says congratulations, and my head was on my remodel, and we've been sharing remodel horror stories, and also successes too. So I thought, oh, maybe she's congratulating me on that. So I kind of responded with a question mark, and then she sent me the announcement.
Oh no.
So yeah, I was like, what? Yeah, I was. It was surreal. I mean, I was in there with all these like heavy hitters in comedy, these amazing shows and editors whose work I admire. So, yeah, I was floored. I had to sit down for a second.
Isn't that a nice feeling though, really, to be floored? How do they choose? I mean, it's you're nominated for a particular episode. I find that's interesting. And we'll talk a little bit more about the episode and we'll and not to be too inside baseball or too technical when we talk about it, but how do they choose which
Which
show of
episode?
the series that gets nominated? I just find that fascinating.
I don't know how people choose to vote, but I know that, HBO submits an episode for everybody that works on the show, and it goes to this humongous like ballot that gets sent out to all the members of the Academy and the especially editors who get to vote, and they vote in a nomination round, and I guess I got enough votes.
Okay, well, let's talk specifically about the episode. So the listeners know we're talking about Insecure, and it's season 5. I believe episode 8. Is that correct?
Yes,
All
yes.
right. I did get to watch that, and it is a fascinating way that you did it. But I did read an article and doing the research for this that you had written or an interview that you had done called Choices, and about the choices you had to make in doing this episode and why it was nominated because what you did was technically very difficult to do. So just so our listeners understand a little bit, and again, let's not get too technical for them, we'll lose them, but a little bit so they understand what we're talking about and why this nomination is so important.
Well, I when I read the script, I fell in love with it immediately because, I think as a freelancer, as just a normal person, I mean, I feel like we always make a lot of choices, right? Like, and I know that for myself, I have a really hard time picking projects. So, like, do I choose project A, project B? What would happen? I've always wished I had a crystal ball to see what would happen if I went one way or another. And so this episode was really special to me, mostly for that reason, because Issa herself is at a crossroads in her personal and career life, and she has to basically choose one or the other. She's got to make the hard decisions, and she gets to have a little glimpse into what would happen. Depending on which path she chooses. So I was really excited to work on that because I thought visually it would be really fun. And the challenges, of course, is like, we've kind of gotten into her fantasies before in the previous seasons, but never in this length. And they were always like quick little blurps to kind of make it like kind of make a joke out of the situation. They're always for a comedic effect, and this was not that. It was also very humorous, but they were long, and and it also was important to show that how much she has transformed throughout the seasons. And so for me, I think tweaking her performances from her in the real setting of the episode versus her fantasy, and then her fantasy within the fantasy, that was really fun because it was interesting to have her. She has come through and transformed into a more self-assured person by season 5, but then I got to kind of like turn it up a notch in the fantasy, and then really turn it up a notch, in her fantasy within the fantasy, just really show her as like this confident, woman who was in charge, like she's running her business and, flying first class and just doing her thing, so for me, that was a lot of fun. And, but I think the thing that really, I joke about this, but it's not really a joke. It almost broke my brain is the last Mir Issa scene in the episode. To anybody, it just looks like a very simple scene, one or no edits, but there was many edits that were very invisible. And the way they shot it, it was done so that Issa had to perform two different roles, two different versions of herself, real Issa, Mir Issa. Well, because it was both shot on the same day, they couldn't play back her performance as Mir Issa for the role of real Issa to react to. Very much in the same way that if you were shooting a conversation, you would have the other person there to kind of pace your performance off of. Well, without that, it's impossible, it's humanly impossible, no matter who it is, for the performances to match up timing wise. And so I had to figure out how to do it so it sounded and felt and, like really believe that it was a conversation between two of them. And it just, it took a lot of manipulation of the video, slowing it down, speeding it up so that it wasn't visible to the human eye. But then I think the end result kind of really made it look like they were having a conversation in real time when they weren't at all. So
Yes, it does. It does look that way. Yeah, really amazing, amazing. I mean, for everybody, you should go if you haven't seen that episode of Insecure. As I said, season 5, episode 8. You should definitely watch it because it is interesting to after you hear how you went about editing that particular, um, you know, that segment, that scene, it makes you want to go back and relook at it and see if you can see any of those kind of edits or anything that went on. But yeah, it's a really interesting way of doing it. So I can see why they nominated you for this.
yeah, I mean it's technical, but also kind of really it's really what editing's about, the pacing and the tone and the all of it. So yes, it took a lot of technical um, stuff, magic to make it happen. I think the end result is looks like it would be any other edited conversation. So I'm really happy about that.
It did. It turned out great. It turned out great. So do you have a speech ready for this year's Emmy?
No, no. Like I said, I'm so happy that I could, wrap up the season with a nomination. If I seriously, I go into this with no expectations at all. So no, I don't. Yeah, I don't have one.
No, no, nothing. Okay, well that's good. It's probably better that way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to disappoint myself, but
Right.
but then yeah, it'll be embarrassing if I do win and I have nothing to say when I get up there.
And I know it's always hard when you win an award. I don't think you didn't. I don't know. Maybe you did do this. I just read that quote. Where so many people are thinking, so many people, and you just go on and on. And for the audience, I mean, we know you need to do that in some ways, and thanking people. But I think it's some of the short speeches are the ones that are more memorable. Like yours, it was a memorable speech. It said something that had meaning, and that's what's really important. So, um, so it's very interesting. So we'll see. I'll be holding you in my thoughts and prayers on Emmy night.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. You're welcome. So, what are you working on now? You've got so many projects going on. You also did a show on Apple Plus called Generations. Is that and
Yeah,
let's talk about that.
that was a fascinating show. It was still in the middle of the pandemic. I think they reached out like maybe July. I think it was July of 2020. And saying that they're gonna, start shooting this series. It's about, group of high school kids who are kind of coming to terms with their, not just their own identity, but their own sexual identities as well. So, and it's called Generation. So I was like, okay, cool. I read the script, saw the pilot. It was great. And I said, sign me up. And honestly, for the longest time, I was like, how are they going to do this? We're in the middle of a pandemic. This is probably one of the very first shows to start shooting again. It's a bunch of high school kids and it's going to be shot in a high school. How do you keep everybody safe? Well, I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And we all worked remotely. The other editors the other editors on the show were amazing. And the weird thing is, we all became good friends, but we've never met each other in real life. Yeah, very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Daniel Barnes is a creator, along with his daughter Zoe, and this is really her idea, her creation.
Mm.
And I remember talking to Daniel, like, how did this come about? And he was like, Zoe wanted to write a pilot, so we thought, great, this will be good. Let's teach her some grit. Um, and so they go and pitch it and they sell it, and they're like, well, okay, that wasn't really the plan, but all right, let's make a go of it.
how,
And
how old is the daughter?
I think at the time she was like 17
Oh my
when she
goodness.
first pitched it. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And then I think by the time we shot it, was like she was 19, and I believe she just went off to college after we were done shooting.
Wow, that's
So
exciting.
yeah. And it
Yeah.
was fascinating too, because like, the point of view of Daniel was so brilliant. Everything was going to be told through the eyes of the teenagers, right? So nothing was ever objective. It was always from their point of view. And there are times when, traditionally you would start with a wide shot of the room or establish the environment before you go into the story. But no, this is you're the kid. So you're going to walk into this space, and then you will slowly discover the room that you're in, the people that you're talking to, and it's okay if the camera doesn't, catch every single line on screen, because again, if you think back to when you're a teenager in high school, you don't necessarily catch everything. There are a lot of things that you miss and you don't realize until afterwards. So I thought the concept of the series was so genius, and I loved editing it because it was just like nothing I've ever done before, approaching a story that way. So it was great.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. So when you're looking at a project, what makes you decide that you want to get involved with that particular project? Because you are busy. So it's not like, I think you have lots of choices. It's not one that you just, oh, well, I got to get a job and I've got to, take anything that comes along. You are very much in demand, and I'm sure you have lots of things to choose from. So when you're looking at your next project, what is it that makes you choose it?
Mm. The story has to resonate with me. The characters, I love powerful stories where, it's not defined by just it being comedy or drama. I like things with the tone that shifts and isn't easily contained. Um, and so, yeah, because it just allows me more space and, like a bigger palette to create with. So that's what I look for first. But then, and obviously the story and the filmmakers. Like I was looking for movies this past, I don't know, I guess last fall. And I was reading a lot of scripts and a lot of them were great. But then the one I chose, it's still untitled, but it's directed by Del Lim for Lionsgate. It's a comedy about four Asian women who travel across Asia to look for one of their birth mothers. And I just gravitated towards it. Not only, I mean, the script was really brilliantly written and it was funny and heartfelt. Yeah, I was sobbing by the end of it. I did not expect to be crying after reading a script about a
Wow.
comedy. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's got a lot of heart. But the thing that drew me to that one was, again, back to representation. I don't get to work on projects where I see four women, Asian women that look like me. So that was super exciting for me to do that one. And most recently, I chose Downtown Owl because I love the script and I love the book. It was based on a novel by Chuck Klosterman, and I just fell in love with the directors when I met with them because I love their sensibility and their approach to the story, and so yeah, I guess I go with my gut.
Yeah, that's a good thing to go with, usually. So what's Downtown Al all about? Who directed that?
Well, it's based on that book called Downtown Owl, and it's about a teacher that goes into this kind of a fictitious town called Owl in North Dakota. And it's about the cast of characters that she meets, her coming to terms of like what life was about, and then this humongous snowstorm that kind of upends everybody's life. So it's a very interesting story. And Lily Rabe is the star. She also co-directed it with Hamish Linklater. They're both in it and directed it, and her performance is incredible. I mean, she alone holds the entire movie together. Like she's the spine through the entire thing, and we just follow her on her little journey into that town, discovering what life is about.
Oh, that sounds really fascinating. Do you know when that one's coming out?
Well, we're hoping a lock picture soon, and then we'll see what happens. But hopefully it'll get released. I don't know, maybe sometime next year, early.
I'll have to look for that one and make sure the filmmakers are on the show next year when it comes out, so we can talk about it in more detail for
That'd be great.
sure. The film you talked about with the four Asian women, uh, do you know when that's coming out? They don't have a title. Is it finished or is that still in production?
We're very close to finishing that as well. I'm sure there's a title that someone knows somewhere. I just haven't been privy to that yet. But yeah, I believe that is hopefully we're going to release that maybe first or second quarter of next year. So spring, summer, hopefully.
Okay, well, another one I'll look for next year for sure to have on the show. Definitely. So for you, what's different about editing a TV series versus a film? What's is your process different on those? Obviously the TV series is something that's done more quickly than a film. So what's your process like when you're editing?
The actual process isn't that different. I still approach it the same way, make sure that I understand the tone, the subtext, and choose performances that always serve as the story the best. And but I think, yeah, a big difference is that on TV series there are other editors, and so it's nice to be able to pop into someone else's cutting room and say, "Hey, can I show you this? Like, let me know if this is landing right." And you can kind of bounce ideas off of one another. With a feature, is just me. So I have to really, be able to teach myself to sit back, look at it, and ask myself the hard questions like, is this really funny or is it just funny to me because of XYZ that no one knows about? So yeah, so I have to often remind myself of that. And also, again, the same thing too, like with a feature, you're on it for a very long time, and so are the jokes still funny 6 months later?
Mhm.
Because you've seen it and heard it so many times, versus where like a TV series, you have another episode to go to, and so by the time you go back to the other episode, it's still funny. So yeah, it's I would say that those are the biggest differences.
And so then if you were, I mean, you had a circuitous route sort of into editing. You did a few things before you became an editor. Um, if you were to give advice to someone who wants to become an editor, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, if they're coming out of college, I would say look into the American Cinema Editors Internship Program. They do it once a year, and it's phenomenal. They introduce you to all the top editors, put you in their cutting room, so you come out of it with a very well-rounded knowledge and also a really nice network of people that you can, kind of lean on and who will help you with your career. But I'd say if you're an assistant who's trying to make that jump, I said cut as much as possible. Cut everything you can. It doesn't matter if they're paying you $5 or $5,000. Just cut it. Get the experience. Get the samples so you have something to show people. And most importantly, tell your editor that you want to cut, so they can hopefully help you, make that jump into the seat.
I know when we talked last time, you said one of the reasons you didn't want to become an editor is because you thought you're just going to sit in a dark room all day alone. So, let's talk about that a little bit. How did that change for you? And how do you feel about that now? Because you've been doing it quite a long time now.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that was my very rudimentary interpretation of what an editor was before I really even knew what an editor did. Um, so yeah, it's not as, I mean, yeah, we have moments where it's very solitary. It's just you with the dailies, and you're putting it together. But then there's great process where directors come in and you get to discover things together and you collaborate, and then they leave and then producers come in, and so you work on that together and then it gets to studio, so it's a lot more collaborative, I've learned, than what my initial idea of editing was, and I find that that's like really my favorite process or part of it, is collaborating with people and kind of finding the new gems that you may have missed the first time around. So yeah, I've learned a lot.
Well, you did mention you talked about doing generations during the pandemic. So how was working during the pandemic for you, editing the various projects that you were working on? What was different for you during the pandemic?
Oh, it was very interesting. I had never, I would do like little side projects from home, but it was never like full time. Like, you're on deadline and this is a whole series. And we have to pivot very quickly, basically turn the second bedroom into an edit bay. We had to upgrade our internet, because I realized the first time I started working with a producer, whatever level of internet we were at, it sucked it all up. And so my husband had to also work from home. So all of a sudden I hear this, what the? What happened to the internet? Like, sorry, I'm using all of it. So yeah, so we had to upgrade. There's, you know, technical changes we had to make, but a lot of it was, I mean, I love the 5-step commute from my bedroom to my
Yes. Yes.
also learning how to turn it off too, so that at night when I think of something, I don't just run into the other room and do it. You know, it's like making sure that I found a balance so that I wasn't just at work 24/7.
Right. Great advice for everyone to have balance. Well, Nena, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. I look forward to having you back on the show. I wish you much success with the Emmys this year. As I said, I will hold you in my thoughts and prayers. And everyone, you can see some of Nena's work, as we talked about on Insecure. Season 5, episode 8, also Apple TV's Generations. So, and movies coming out in the near future. So, in 2023. So, Nena, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. All right.
Bye.
Bye.